The footsteps were gaining on her. Seren Ashford's lungs burned as she tore through the darkened streets of Mayfair, her worn boots slapping against rain-slicked cobblestones. Behind her, the heavy treads of two men echoed off the townhouse walls, their crude shouts swallowed by the autumn storm. "There's nowhere to run, girl. Your brother owes what he owes." She didn't look back. Looking back meant slowing down, and slowing down meant being caught by men who'd made it clear that Phineas's debts could be paid in other ways if coin wasn't available. Lightning split the sky, illuminating a stone wall ahead, too high to climb. An iron gate to her left, ornate and imposing, wrought with serpents and thorns. She didn't think. She simply ran, her fingers finding the latch, her body slipping through the narrow opening before the gate clanged shut behind her. She was in a garden. Not a public garden, a private one, immaculately maintained even in the storm's chaos. Geometric hedges formed careful patterns around a central fountain where stone angels wept rainwater. Roses, though stripped of their summer glory, climbed trellises toward windows that glowed with warm candlelight. This was someone's home. Someone wealthy. Someone powerful. Seren pressed herself against the interior wall, her chest heaving, her auburn hair plastered to her face. The men's voices reached her, muffled through stone. "Where'd she go?" "Must have ducked into an alley. Come on, she can't have gone far." Their footsteps receded. Seren allowed herself one shuddering breath of relief. "You're trespassing." The voice came from the darkness, low and precise, carrying the unmistakable authority of a man who had never been refused anything in his life. Seren spun, her back hitting the wall, her heart seizing in her chest. He emerged from the shadows beneath an archway, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair damp from rain he seemed utterly indifferent to. His face was all sharp angles and harder edges, handsome in the way a blade was handsome, beautiful and dangerous, and designed to cut. But it was his eyes that pinned her in place, pale gray, cold as winter frost, assessing her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. Her voice cracked. She swallowed and tried again. "I apologize. I didn't realize. I was being chased, and the gate was open, and you're on the private grounds of Thornhaven House." He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of him, sandalwood and something darker, smoke perhaps, or aged whiskey. "Do you have any idea whose garden you've just invaded?" Thornhaven House. The name crashed through her awareness with the force of a physical blow. Everyone in London knew Thornhaven House. Everyone knew its master, Corvin Ashworth, the Duke of Thornhaven, called the Iron Duke by those who feared him, which was nearly everyone. A man rumored to have destroyed 3 business rivals in a single season, a man whose late father had been beloved, but whose own reputation was forged in ice and calculation. She had just trespassed onto the property of the most ruthless nobleman in England. "Your Grace." The title came out barely above a whisper. "I meant no intrusion. I'll leave immediately. You'll go nowhere." He closed the remaining distance between them, and Seren pressed harder against the wall, as if she might melt through it. This close, she could see the rain clinging to his lashes, the firm set of his jaw, and the complete absence of warmth in his expression. "My groundskeeper saw you enter. My butler observed from the window. 3 of my footmen are currently debating whether to summon the constable." His head tilted, that cold gaze traveling over her sodden dress, her muddy boots, her desperate, cornered posture. A young woman alone on a duke's property at night, in the rain. No chaperone, no explanation that society would accept. The implication landed like a stone in her stomach. "Nothing happened," she said quickly. "Nothing improper. I was only here for a moment. If you simply let me leave." "Let you leave?" Something flickered across his face. Not amusement. Nothing so warm. Interest, perhaps. The way a cat might show interest in a mouse. And when the gossip spreads, as it inevitably will, when the servants talk, as servants always do, when all of London learns that an unknown woman was discovered on my grounds after dark. Serene's mouth went dry. They wouldn't. They absolutely would. By morning, every drawing room in Mayfair will be discussing the Duke of Thornhaven's mysterious midnight visitor. Your reputation, whatever remains of it, will be ash. He paused, letting the words settle like stones dropping into still water. Unless, of course, there was a reasonable explanation for your presence. She stared at him, uncomprehending. What explanation could possibly? You could be my wife. The world tilted. Surely she had misheard him. Surely the rain and the fear and the exhaustion had corrupted her senses. I beg your pardon? Not immediately, of course. These things require proper staging. He began to circle her slowly, and she had the terrible sense of being evaluated, measured, and weighed against some invisible standard. An engagement, announced within the week. A quiet ceremony within the month. You would live at Thornhaven House, enjoy all the privileges of a duchess, and want for nothing. You're mad, Serene breathed. I'm practical. He stopped his circling, facing her directly. I need an heir. My grandmother has been parading eligible women before me for 2 years, each more vapid and calculating than the last. I have no interest in any of them. No interest in courtship, in romance, in the endless performance society demands. Then why? Because duty requires an heir, and I will not shirk duty, however distasteful. His voice hardened. I'm offering you an arrangement, a transaction. You give me a child, preferably a son. Once the succession is secured, you're free. An estate of your own, a generous settlement, complete independence. You could live however you chose, wherever you chose. You would never want for anything again. Serene's mind raced, scrambling for purchase on a situation spiraling beyond her control. You don't know anything about me. I could be anyone. A criminal. A fortune hunter. You're Serene Ashford. The casual revelation of her name stopped her cold. Daughter of the late merchant Aldrich Ashford, who lost his fortune 4 years ago to fraudulent business partners. Sister to Phineas Ashford, who has accumulated considerable debts with men who don't accept excuses. Currently residing in a boarding house on Mercer Street, employed intermittently as a seamstress and lady's companion. Horror crept up her spine. How do you? I make it my business to know who enters my property. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small leather notebook, flipping it open. Those men chasing you work for a moneylender named Croft. Your brother owes him nearly £300. Croft has grown impatient with promises. He sent his men to collect collateral. The word collateral made her stomach turn. She knew exactly what kind of collateral Croft had in mind. So you see, the Duke continued, closing the notebook. I'm not plucking a random woman from my garden. I'm offering a solution to both our problems. You need protection from men who would use you to pay your brother's debts. I need an heir without the tedium of courtship. The arrangement benefits us both. Serene's hands trembled. She pressed them flat against the wet stone wall to still them. And if I refuse? Then you leave through that gate and take your chances with Croft's men. He shrugged, a small, elegant movement. Or you go to the constable and explain why you were trespassing on a duke's property at midnight. Either way, your reputation is destroyed and your circumstances remain dire. She wanted to rage at him, to scream that he had no right to trap her like this, to exploit her vulnerability so coldly. But rage required energy she didn't have, and screaming would change nothing. He was offering her a way out, a gilded cage, perhaps, but a cage that came with safety, security, freedom from Croft and his men. All she had to do was give him an heir. The thought sent ice through her veins. I can't. The words rose in her throat, desperate to escape. The truth she had carried for 3 years, ever since the scarlet fever had swept through London and taken her mother, and nearly taken her. The illness that had left her alive but hollowed out. Barren. Unable to bear children. The physicians had been certain. The damage was permanent. She would never conceive. And here stood the Duke of Thornhaven, offering her everything she'd ever wanted, in exchange for the one thing she could never provide. Tell him. Tell him now. End this before it begins. But if she told him, he would send her away. Back to Croft's men, back to poverty and fear, and a brother whose schemes would eventually get them both killed. How long, she heard herself ask. How long would this arrangement last? Something shifted in his expression. Satisfaction, perhaps, at sensing her capitulation. Until you produce an heir. A year? Perhaps 2. Then you're free. A year. 2 years. Surely in that time, something would change. Perhaps she could find another way out. Perhaps he would tire of her and release her from the contract. Perhaps she was simply too frightened to face the alternative. I have conditions, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. His eyebrow rose fractionally. You're negotiating with me? You need me, or you wouldn't have made this offer. She pushed away from the wall, straightening her spine despite her sodden dress and mud-caked boots. That gives me leverage. For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then his lips curved, not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one. Name your conditions. First, my brother's debts are cleared, completely, and he's protected from Croft and anyone else he's angered. Done. Second, I want it in writing that when this ends, I receive the settlement you promised, an estate, funds, independence, legally binding, witnessed by solicitors. Reasonable. What else? Seren hesitated. The third condition mattered most, and she had to phrase it carefully. If at any point during this arrangement you decide you want a different wife, a real wife, you release me immediately with the full settlement. I won't be set aside and left with nothing. His gaze sharpened. You think I would discard you? I think powerful men do whatever serves them. I want protection against that. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but neither of them moved. They stood in his garden, like 2 generals negotiating terms of surrender, each measuring the other's resolve. Very well, he said finally. Your conditions are accepted. The documents will be drawn up tomorrow. You'll sign them, and we'll announce the engagement at week's end. He extended his hand, elegant and commanding, waiting for her to seal the bargain. Seren looked at his outstretched palm. This was madness. She was about to enter a marriage built on lies, promising something she could never deliver. But the alternative was unthinkable. She placed her hand in his. His grip was warm and firm, his fingers closing around hers with a possessiveness that made her breath catch. We have an agreement, he said. Welcome to Thornhaven House, Miss Ashford. He released her hand and turned toward the glowing windows of the mansion. She followed, her boots squishing against the gravel path, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, the garden gate stood open, a path to freedom she could no longer take. Ahead, the great house waited, beautiful and imposing and full of shadows. She had just sold herself to a man called Ruthless by everyone who knew him, and he had no idea that she could never give him what he wanted most. The interior of Thornhaven House was overwhelming in its grandeur. Seren followed the Duke through a servant's entrance, acutely aware of her bedraggled appearance against the backdrop of marble floors and gilded mirrors. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across walls, hung with portraits of stern-faced Ashworth ancestors. Every surface gleamed with the kind of care that required an army of servants working invisibly around the clock. She had grown up in comfortable circumstances before her father's ruin, but this was something else entirely. This was wealth so vast it had become architectural, built into the very bones of the house. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every carpet beneath her muddy boots spoke of generations of accumulated power. "You'll need dry clothing," the Duke said without looking back. "I'll have the housekeeper attend to it." "Your Grace, in private, you may call me Corvin." The words were clipped, almost reluctant. "It will seem strange if my betrothed addresses me by title." Betrothed. The word echoed strangely in her mind. 12 hours ago, she had been mending torn hems in a cramped boarding house room. Now she was betrothed to a duke who expected an heir she could never give him. "Mrs. Blackthorne." Corvin addressed a severe woman in dark gray, who appeared as if summoned by magic. "This is Miss Seren Ashford. She will be staying in the Ivory Suite. See that she has everything she needs." Mrs. Blackthorne's eyes swept over Serene with professional assessment. If she found anything lacking, her expression didn't show it. "Of course, Your Grace. This way, miss." Seren glanced back at Corvin, but he had already turned away, disappearing through a doorway with the smooth efficiency of a man who had dismissed her from his thoughts entirely. She followed Mrs. Blackthorne up a sweeping staircase, her fingers trailing along a banister polished to mirror brightness. Portraits watched her ascent, generations of Ashworth dukes and duchesses with their cold eyes and proud bearing. "You don't belong here," their painted gazes seemed to say. "You never will." The Ivory Suite was larger than her entire boarding house. Pale silk hangings dressed the windows, catching the candlelight in soft folds. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall, its covers turned down to reveal crisp white linens. A fire crackled in the hearth, warming air scented with lavender and beeswax. "I've sent for a bath," Mrs. Blackthorne said, "and clothing will be brought up shortly. Lady Romilly keeps several trunks here. You appear to be a similar size." "Lady Romilly? His Grace's younger sister. She's currently in residence." Something almost warm flickered across the housekeeper's face. "She'll be delighted to meet you, I'm sure." Before Seren could respond, Mrs. Blackthorne withdrew, and she was alone. She moved to the window, looking out over the darkened garden, where she'd stood with Corvin only minutes ago. From here, she could see the gate where she'd entered, fleeing for her life. How quickly everything had changed. A knock interrupted her thoughts. She turned, expecting a servant with bathwater, but the woman who burst through the door was neither servant nor expected. She was young, perhaps 19 or 20, with dark hair that matched Corvin's and warm brown eyes that couldn't have been more different. Where he was cold, angles, and sharp edges, she was all soft curves and bright energy, practically bouncing with enthusiasm. "You're real?" the young woman exclaimed, seizing both of Seren's hands. "I thought Jenkins was making it up when he said Corvin brought a woman home. An actual woman. Into this mausoleum of a house. You must be Lady Romilly. Just Romilly, please. We're going to be sisters, after all." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Corvin told me about the engagement. Well, told is generous. Announced it like he was reading a stock report. But I extracted enough details to understand the basics." Seren's stomach tightened. "What did he tell you exactly?" "That he found you in circumstances that required intervention, that you've agreed to marry him, and that I should make you feel welcome." Romilly squeezed her hands. "He left out everything interesting, naturally. He always does." There was no judgment in her voice, only genuine curiosity and warmth. "I'm sure you have questions," Seren began carefully. "Hundreds. But they can wait until you've had a bath and something to eat. You look absolutely wrecked. if you don't mind my saying. Romilly released her hands but didn't retreat. I just wanted to introduce myself, and to warn you. Warn me? Romilly's expression grew more serious, though warmth still lingered in her eyes. Grandmother arrives tomorrow. She's been at the country estate, but Corvin sent word of the engagement, and she's rushing back to assess the situation. Assess? You. Romilly's smile turned rueful. She spent 2 years trying to marry Corvin off to every eligible woman with a pulse and a pedigree. She won't be pleased that he's chosen someone without her approval. She'll want to examine you like a horse at auction. Seren thought of the Duke's cold assessment in the garden and wondered if it ran in the family. Don't look so frightened. Romilly patted her arm. She's terrifying, but she's not unreasonable. Show her you have spine, and you'll survive. She swept toward the door, then paused, looking back with that mischievous glint returning. One more thing. My brother isn't as cold as he pretends. He's just forgotten how to be anything else. Her voice softened. Our father died 9 months ago. Corvin hasn't been the same since. He thinks if he feels nothing, nothing can hurt him. She was gone before Seren could respond, leaving behind only the lingering scent of rosewater and the uncomfortable weight of her words. Seren sank onto the edge of the bed, her mind spinning. Tomorrow she would face the Dowager Duchess. Tomorrow she would begin the charade that would either save her or destroy her. And somewhere in this house, a duke who had forgotten how to feel expected her to give him the one thing she never could. Morning arrived with cruel brightness, sunlight streaming through the ivory curtains like an interrogation lamp. Seren had slept poorly, her dreams haunted by gray eyes and impossible bargains. Now she sat before a vanity mirror while a young maid named Nell arranged her hair, watching her own reflection with something like disbelief. The borrowed dress fit perfectly, a morning gown of soft rose muslin that made her skin glow and her eyes look larger. With her auburn hair pinned up properly, and the dark circles beneath her eyes concealed by Nell's skillful touch, she almost looked like she belonged. Almost. The Dowager Duchess has requested your presence in the blue drawing room, Nell said, setting aside the hairbrush. Mrs. Blackthorne will escort you down. Serene's stomach clenched. Has she said anything? About me? Nell's hesitation was answer enough. Her Grace arrived very early this morning. She's been with His Grace for over an hour. An hour? An hour to discuss the strange woman her grandson had inexplicably decided to marry. An hour to catalog every reason why this match was unsuitable. The walk to the blue drawing room felt like a march to the gallows. Mrs. Blackthorne's steady footsteps echoed off the marble floors, a drumbeat counting down to judgment. The doors opened. The Dowager Duchess of Thornhaven stood by the window, silhouetted against the morning light. She was tall, silver-haired, with the same sharp bone structure as her grandson, but weathered by age into something more formidable. Her black dress spoke of mourning still observed, her posture of a woman who had commanded rooms for half a century and saw no reason to stop. She turned, and Seren felt herself pinned by eyes so pale they were almost colorless, like ice over deep water. So, the Dowager's voice could have cut glass. This is the woman my grandson found in his garden. Seren curtsied, grateful for years of her mother's instruction. Your Grace. Pretty enough, I suppose. Good bone structure. The dress is borrowed, clearly. Your hands show signs of work, needle pricks and calluses. The Dowager moved closer, circling her with the slow deliberation of a predator. You were a seamstress, I understand. Before that, the daughter of a merchant who overextended his reach. My father was betrayed by his partners, Your Grace. He didn't fail through incompetence. Everyone who fails has an excuse. The Dowager stopped directly before her, What's yours? Seren held her gaze. I have none. I haven't failed yet. Something flickered in those icy eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or the faintest grudging respect. Corvin tells me you negotiated conditions for this arrangement, that you demanded your brother's debts cleared and a guaranteed settlement. The dowager's lips thinned. Most women in your circumstances would have accepted whatever crumbs were offered. Most women in my circumstances don't have leverage. You think you have leverage? The dowager laughed, a sharp sound without warmth. You're a penniless seamstress who wandered onto my grandson's property while fleeing creditors. The only leverage you have is whatever he chooses to give you. Then perhaps your grace should ask why he chose to give it. The silence that followed was absolute. Seren could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the danger of having spoken so boldly, but she would not look away. She had survived too much to crumble before a title. Sit, the dowager commanded, gesturing toward a settee. Seren sat, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. The dowager took the chair opposite, arranging her skirts with practiced grace. My grandson is not a sentimental man. He doesn't rescue damsels or play hero. If he offered you this arrangement, it's because he calculated that you serve his purposes better than the alternatives. I understand that, Your Grace. Do you? Because what I see is a young woman who's already imagining herself in love with him, who thinks that if she performs her role well enough, he'll develop feelings for her. The dowager leaned forward. He won't. Corvin doesn't do feelings. He does duty. He'll use you to produce an heir, and then he'll install you in some country estate where you can live comfortably but invisibly for the rest of your life. The words were meant to wound, and they did. Not because Seren harbored romantic fantasies, but because they stripped away any pretense about what this arrangement truly was. I have no illusions about your grandson's feelings, she said carefully, nor any expectations beyond what was agreed. He wants an heir. I want security. It's a transaction. Is it? The dowager's gaze sharpened. Then why do I sense you're hiding something? Serene's blood turned to ice. Everyone hides something, Your Grace. Surely you know that better than most. For a terrible moment, she thought she'd gone too far. The dowager's expression hardened, her fingers tightening on the arm of her chair. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. It was not a warm smile, but it was genuine. You have spine, she said. Good. You'll need it. She rose, moving toward a small writing desk. My son died 9 months ago. Sudden illness. Very quick. Corvin was in Scotland when it happened. He didn't make it back in time. Seren remembered Romilly's words. He's just forgotten how to be anything else. He blames himself, the dowager continued, her back to Seren. Thinks if he'd been here, he could have done something. He couldn't have, of course. The physicians were quite clear. But grief doesn't listen to logic. I'm sorry for your loss, Your Grace. I don't want your pity. The dowager turned, her expression hard again. I want you to understand what you're walking into. My grandson is broken in ways he refuses to acknowledge. He's buried himself in duty because duty is safe, controllable. It doesn't require feeling anything. She crossed back to Seren, stopping close enough that her shadow fell across the settee. If you're truly here only for the arrangement, for the security, and nothing more, then we'll have no problems. Complete your end of the bargain, produce an heir, and take your settlement with my blessing. She paused, her gaze boring into Seren's. But if you try to manipulate him, if you use his grief against him, or attempt to worm your way into his heart for your own advantage, I will destroy you. I don't care how sympathetic your circumstances are. I don't care what promises he's made. I will ensure you leave this family with nothing. Seren rose, meeting the dowager's threat with what composure she could muster. "I understand, Your Grace. I doubt that. But you will." The dowager swept past her toward the door, then paused. "The engagement ball is in 5 days. All of society will be watching. Don't embarrass my family." She was gone, leaving Seren alone with the weight of impossible expectations and a secret that grew heavier by the hour. "Produce an heir," the dowager had said. "Complete your end of the bargain." Seren pressed a hand to her stomach, where the truth of her barrenness sat like a stone. She had 5 days to prepare for a ball, and a lifetime of lies stretching out before her. The next 4 days passed in a blur of preparation that left Seren dizzy. Madame Fontaine, the most sought-after modiste in London, arrived with an army of assistants and enough fabric to clothe a small village. She measured and pinned and tutted over Seren's figure with the intensity of a general planning a campaign. "The waist is good, the shoulders acceptable," she murmured in her French-accented English. "But we must do something about the posture. You carry yourself like someone expecting to be struck." "Old habits," Seren said quietly. Madame Fontaine's eyes softened briefly. "New life, new habits. Stand tall. You are to be a duchess." The word felt like a costume she wasn't sure she could wear. Romilly appeared constantly, a whirlwind of enthusiasm and unsolicited advice. She coached Seren on which families to acknowledge warmly, which to address with cool politeness, and which to avoid entirely. "The Pemberton sisters will try to befriend you," Romilly warned during one of their sessions. "Don't trust them. They collect secrets like some people collect china, and they're twice as eager to see things shattered." "And Lady Cressida Hartwell?" Serene had heard the name whispered among the servants. "Who is she?" Romilly's expression clouded. "Grandmother's choice for Corvin, before you appeared." "They were engaged?" "Not formally, but there was an understanding. Cressida has been positioning herself as the future Duchess for nearly a year." Romilly's voice dropped. She won't take kindly to being displaced. Another enemy to add to the growing list. "If you ever need refuge from all this," Romilly added, her tone lighter. "My friend Lady Amara Sinclair keeps a quiet household across Mayfair. She's a widow who values privacy above gossip. I trust her completely." Seren filed the name away, grateful for even the possibility of sanctuary. Through it all, Corvin remained a ghost in his own house. Seren caught glimpses of him, always at a distance, always moving with purpose toward some urgent business that couldn't be delayed. He took meals in his study. He rose before dawn and retired long after the household slept. He was avoiding her. The realization shouldn't have stung, but it did. This was an arrangement, nothing more. He owed her nothing beyond the terms they'd agreed upon. Yet some foolish part of her had hoped for. What? Conversation? Connection? The chance to know the man she was about to marry? On the evening before the ball, she found herself in the library. It had become her sanctuary over the past days. A vast room, lined floor to ceiling with books that smelled of leather and history. Here, surrounded by the written words of minds far greater than hers, she could almost forget the impossibility of her situation. She was reaching for a volume of poetry when a voice stopped her cold. That was my father's favorite. Serene spun, her heart lurching. Corvin stood in the doorway, his cravat loosened, his hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. "I didn't mean to intrude. Romilly said I could—" "You're not intruding." He entered the room slowly, moving to stand beside her. This close, she could see the shadows beneath his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "Don, he used to read it aloud in the evenings. Said poetry was meant to be heard, not just seen." Seren's fingers hovered over the leather spine. Were you close? You and your father? Once. The word carried weight. Before I became the heir, and he became the duke. Duty has a way of creating distance. She understood that better than he knew. Her own father had retreated into silence after his ruin, present in body, but absent in every way that mattered. You can borrow it, Corvin said. Any of them. Books shouldn't gather dust. Thank you. She pulled the volume carefully from the shelf, cradling it against her chest. That's kind. It's practical. You'll need something to occupy your time when the season's social demands become tedious. But something in his voice softened the dismissal. Do you read much? Whenever I can. Books were the one luxury we couldn't afford to sell. My mother said they fed the soul when the body went hungry. Corvin studied her with those unnerving gray eyes. She sounds wise. She was. She died 3 years ago. Scarlet fever. The same illness that had stolen her ability to bear children. But she couldn't say that. Couldn't let the truth slip now, when he was looking at her with something almost like warmth. I'm sorry, he said, and the words sounded genuine. Losing a mother leaves a particular kind of wound. You lost yours too. Romilly mentioned, Romilly talks too much. But there was no real censure in his voice. He moved away, putting distance between them, and the moment of connection shattered like glass. The ball tomorrow, he said, his tone businesslike again. You'll be presented as my betrothed. There will be questions, scrutiny, attempts to find fault. Show no weakness. I've had practice hiding weakness, Your Grace. Corvin, he corrected quietly. When we're alone. She nodded, clutching the book of poetry like a shield. Corvin. He moved toward the door, then paused, his hand on the frame. The dress Madame Fontaine created for tomorrow. The silver one. What about it? Wear it. He didn't look back. It suits you. Then he was gone, leaving Seren alone with a borrowed book and the lingering warmth of an almost connection. She opened the dawn to a random page, her eyes falling on a line that made her breath catch. Love's mysteries and souls do grow, but yet the body is his book. Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, to the emptiness that defined her secret. The body was his book, and hers told a story she could never let him read. The Thornhaven ballroom blazed with 1,000 candles. Seren stood at the top of the grand staircase, her fingers resting lightly on Corvin's arm, watching the sea of silk and jewels below. The silver dress caught the light with every breath, transforming her into something ethereal, something that belonged in this glittering world. She had never felt more like a fraud. Ready? Corvin murmured, his voice pitched for her ears alone. No. Good. Honesty is useful. His hand covered hers briefly, a fleeting warmth that sent unexpected shivers down her spine. Just follow my lead. They descended together, and the crowd parted like water before a ship's prow. Whispers rose in their wake, a susurrus of curiosity and speculation. That's her? The mysterious fiancée? No family to speak of, no fortune, no connections. She must have something to recommend her, or why would he? Perhaps she's already carrying his... Seren kept her chin high, and her expression serene, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Corvin guided her through the crowd with practiced ease, making introductions so smoothly that she barely had to speak. The Marquis of Dunmore and his wife, safe allies. Lord Ashby, tedious but harmless. The Viscountess Pemberton, smile, but reveal nothing. Each name, each face, each calculated greeting. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Then the crowd shifted, and Seren found herself face to face with the most beautiful woman she had ever seen. Lady Cressida Hartwell was everything Seren was not. Tall and willowy, with hair the color of spun gold and eyes like summer sky. Her gown was a masterpiece of rose silk and Belgian lace, undoubtedly Parisian, undoubtedly worth more than Seren's entire former life. She moved with the practiced grace of someone who had never known uncertainty. "Your Grace." Cressida's curtsy was perfect, her smile sharp as cut crystal. "How delightful to finally meet the woman who has so thoroughly captured your attention." "Lady Cressida," Corvin's voice cooled several degrees. "I wasn't aware you'd be attending. Your grandmother extended the invitation personally. She felt it would be appropriate." Cressida's gaze slid to Seren, assessing, dismissing. "Miss Ashford, isn't it? I don't believe I know the family." "My father was a merchant," Seren said evenly. "Trade rather than titles." How fascinating. The word dripped with condescension. It's remarkable how far determination can carry one, from seamstress to duchess in a matter of days. Quite the fairy tale. Every fairy tale needs a beginning. And an ending. Cressida's smile didn't waver. "I do hope yours is happy. So many of these whirlwind romances end in disappointment." "Then it's fortunate this isn't a romance." Seren felt Corvin stiffen beside her. "It's a partnership. Far more practical." Something flickered in Cressida's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at finding resistance where she'd expected weakness. How refreshingly honest. She turned back to Corvin, dismissing Seren entirely. "Save me a dance, Your Grace, for old time's sake?" "I've already committed every dance this evening. Surely you can make an exception." "I cannot." Corvin's hand pressed more firmly against Serene's back, proprietary and warm. "If you'll excuse us," he steered her away before Cressida could respond, guiding her toward the dance floor, where the orchestra was beginning a waltz. "She's not going to forgive that slight," Seren murmured. "She was never going to forgive your existence. The slight is irrelevant." They took their positions, his hand at her waist, her palm pressed to his. The music swelled, and they began to move. Seren had practiced with a dancing master Romilly had summoned, but this was different. Corvin led with absolute confidence, his movements fluid and controlled. She found herself following instinctively, their bodies moving in unexpected harmony. "You dance well," he said. "You sound surprised." "I've learned to expect surprises from you." They turned across the floor, and Seren caught glimpses of watching faces. The Dowager, her expression unreadable. Romilly, beaming with unsubtle delight. Cressida, her beautiful features twisted with barely concealed fury. "Why did you choose me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "You could have had anyone, Lady Cressida, or a dozen women with titles and fortunes. And I didn't want anyone. I wanted someone who wouldn't bore me." His grip tightened slightly at her waist. "Cressida is everything society values. Beautiful, well-born, accomplished in all the ways that matter to the ton. She would have made an exemplary duchess." "Then why?" "Because I would have suffocated." The words came out rough, honest in a way she hadn't expected. Every conversation, every interaction, every carefully planned moment of our carefully planned life. I could see it stretching out before me like a prison sentence. Serene's heart clenched. "And I'm different?" "You argued with me in a rainstorm while wearing a muddy dress and shoes that were falling apart. You negotiated conditions like a merchant closing a deal. You told my grandmother she was being unfair to her face." Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his lips. "Yes, you're different." The waltz ended, but neither of them moved immediately. They stood in the center of the floor, his hand still holding her, the crowd watching with fascinated intensity. "People are staring," she whispered. "Let them." But he released her, stepping back with careful formality. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Ashford." "Thank you for the honesty, Your Grace." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than propriety allowed. Then he turned, disappearing into the crowd to fulfill whatever obligations awaited him. Seren stood alone, her pulse racing, the ghost of his touch still warm at her waist. She was in trouble. Deep, dangerous trouble. Because she was starting to feel something for her temporary husband. And feeling was the one thing she absolutely could not afford. The ball had thinned to its final, lingering guests when Seren escaped to the garden. The night air was cool against her flushed skin, a relief after hours in the overheated ballroom. She followed a stone path through hedges silvered by moonlight, letting the silence settle around her like a balm. She had survived. The introductions, the scrutiny, the veiled insults, and outright challenges. She had smiled and danced, and deflected questions with carefully rehearsed answers. The Tun had examined her from every angle and found her, if not acceptable, at least interesting enough to tolerate. But tolerance wasn't acceptance, and one night of performance didn't erase the lie at the center of everything. You'll catch cold. Seren turned to find Corvin emerging from the shadows, his coat removed, his shirt loosened at the collar. He carried 2 glasses of champagne, one of which he offered to her. I needed air, she said, accepting the glass. And quiet. The quiet never lasts long in that house. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. You did well tonight. I survived. I'm not sure that qualifies as well. In society, survival is the only metric that matters. They stood in silence, sipping champagne, watching the moonlight paint silver patterns on the garden paths. It should have been awkward. Instead, it felt strangely peaceful. Can I ask you something? Seren said finally. You can ask. I may not answer. Your father. What happened to him? Corvin's hand tightened on his glass. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't respond. Pneumonia, he said finally. Very sudden. He'd always been strong, vital. Then one morning he couldn't breathe, and 3 days later he was gone. I'm sorry. Everyone is sorry. Sorry doesn't change anything. His voice was flat, controlled, but she could hear the pain beneath it. I was in Scotland when it happened, a state business that couldn't wait. By the time I received the message, by the time I made it back. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. You blame yourself, Seren said quietly. I should have been here. Would your presence have changed the outcome? No. The word came out harsh, but I would have had the chance to say goodbye, to tell him. He broke off, jaw clenching. It doesn't matter now. Seren set down her champagne glass and turned to face him fully. It matters. Of course it matters. Why? His eyes met hers, and she saw something raw there, something he usually kept buried beneath layers of ice and duty. Why does it matter to you? This is an arrangement, a transaction. You're not required to care about my grief. I'm not required to do many things. She stepped closer, close enough to see the moonlight reflected in his gray eyes. But caring isn't something that follows requirements. Seren, you asked me why I agreed to this arrangement, she continued. I told you it was for security, for protection. That was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. What is the whole truth? She should stop. She should retreat to safe territory, to the careful distance they'd maintained. But the champagne hummed in her blood, and the moonlight made everything feel dreamlike, and he was looking at her like she was something worth seeing. I agreed because you looked at me like I was a person, she said, not a commodity or a burden or a problem to be solved. You saw me, and no one has seen me in a very long time. The silence stretched between them, sharp with tension and possibility. Then Corvin reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness. I see you, he said. I wish I didn't. It would be easier if you were like the others. If I could use you and forget you and move on without. Without what? He didn't answer with words. He kissed her. His mouth covered hers with a hunger that belied his controlled exterior, his hands cupping her face like she was something precious and breakable. Serene gasped against his lips, her fingers clutching his shirt, her body swaying toward him as if drawn by gravity. This wasn't the careful, performative kiss she'd expected from their wedding night. This was consuming. Real. A confession made in the press of lips and the tangle of breath. She kissed him back, letting herself fall into the sensation, letting herself forget for one perfect moment that this was built on lies. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer, and she felt the rapid beat of his heart against her chest. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. That was, Serene started. A mistake, Corvin finished, but he didn't release her. His forehead rested against hers, his breath warm on her lips. I shouldn't have. We should keep this professional. Is that what you want? Professional? No. The admission seemed torn from him. God help me. No. Serene's heart soared and plummeted simultaneously. He wanted her. He wanted this, but wanting her meant expecting things she couldn't give. Corvin, there's something I need to tell you. Your Grace? They sprang apart as a servant appeared at the edge of the garden, his expression carefully blank. Forgive the interruption, he said. But the Dowager Duchess requires your presence. An urgent messenger arrived during the ball, Your Grace. Her Grace says it cannot wait. Corvin's jaw tightened. Tell her I'll be there shortly. She was quite insistent, Your Grace. She says it concerns Miss Ashford. Serene's blood ran cold. The Dowager. Something about her. What had the old woman discovered? Corvin glanced at her, his expression shifting from tender to guard in an instant. Wait here. I'll handle whatever this is. I should come with you. No. His voice was firm. Let me assess the situation first. He was gone before she could argue, disappearing into the house with the servant, leaving Saren alone in the moonlit garden. Her lips still tingled from his kiss. Her heart still raced, but beneath it all, dread coiled like a serpent. The Dowager had summoned him urgently, about something concerning her. Serene wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the mild night. She had been so careful, had guarded her secret so closely. But secrets had a way of surfacing, especially in houses full of servants who listened and watched and reported to their mistress. What if someone had discovered the truth? What if they knew she was barren? What if even now Corvin was learning that his bride could never give him what he wanted most? She should run. Slip away into the night before he returned, before she had to see the warmth in his eyes turn to ice. But her feet wouldn't move. She stood frozen in the garden where everything had begun, waiting for a judgment she couldn't escape. The minutes stretched like hours. Finally, footsteps on the gravel path. Corvin emerged from the darkness, his expression unreadable. What did she want? Serene asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He stopped several feet away, not closing the distance between them. She's received a letter, he said, from a physician in London, a Dr. Cornelius Blackwood. The name hit her like a physical blow. Dr. Blackwood, the physician who had treated her after the scarlet fever, the one who had delivered the devastating diagnosis. She wrote to him, Corvin continued, his voice terribly calm. After you arrived, asked him to examine the records of any patient matching your description who might have passed through his care in the past 5 years. Serene couldn't breathe. The garden spun around her. He confirmed that a Serene Ashford was treated for scarlet fever 3 years ago. Corvin's eyes bore into hers. He also noted, in considerable medical detail, that the illness left you with significant internal damage. Corvin, damage that, according to Dr. Blackwood, makes it impossible for you to bear children. The words fell like stones into still water. Silence. Absolute, devastating silence. Is it true? Corvin's voice cracked on the question. Look me in the eyes and tell me. Is it true? Serene opened her mouth, but no words came. No lies. No explanations. No desperate defenses. Only the truth, written across her face. Yes, she whispered. It's true. I can't give you an heir. I never could. The garden that had felt like paradise moments ago now felt like a courtroom. Corvin stood motionless, his face carved from stone, every trace of the man who had kissed her erased by this revelation. The moonlight that had seemed romantic now felt harsh, exposing, stripping away every shadow where she might have hidden. How long? His voice was barely recognizable. How long were you planning to deceive me? I wasn't planning. You agreed to an arrangement built entirely on producing an heir. He stepped closer, and she saw the fury burning behind the ice in his eyes. You signed documents. You let me believe. I was going to tell you. The words tumbled out, desperate and inadequate. Tonight, before the servant interrupted, I was trying to... When? After the wedding? After months of failed attempts? After I'd already bound myself to you legally and publicly? His laugh was bitter, hollow. You must have thought me such a fool. No. Serene's voice cracked. I thought you were my only chance at survival. Croft's men were going to... You know what they were going to do. And you offered me a way out. And I was terrified. And I took it without thinking. Without thinking about the consequences for me, for my family, for the title that has been held by Ashworths for 300 years. Shame burned through her, because he was right. She had thought only of her own desperation, her own fear. She had used his offer as a lifeline without considering that she was pulling him under with her. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know that's not enough. I know, you're right. It's not enough. He turned away from her, his shoulders rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. When he spoke again, his voice had gone flat, emotionless, the voice of a duke delivering judgment. The engagement will be dissolved, quietly, to minimize scandal. You'll be given funds sufficient to establish yourself elsewhere, far from London. We will never speak of this again. The words hit her like physical blows. She had expected anger. She had expected consequences. But the cold finality of his dismissal was worse than any rage could have been. Corvin, don't. He still wouldn't look at her. Don't say my name like you have the right to it. Like anything that happened between us was real. It was real. She moved toward him, stopping just short of touching him. The library conversations, the dance, what just happened between us? That was real. What just happened was a moment of weakness that I deeply regret. He finally turned, and his expression was so closed, so distant, that she barely recognized him. You should return to your room. Pack your things. A carriage will be arranged for morning. And if I refuse to go? Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or anger at her continued defiance. Then I'll have you removed. Don't test me on this, Miss Ashford. Whatever tender feelings may have developed, they don't outweigh what you've done. Miss Ashford, not Serene, not any more. She wanted to argue, to fight, to make him understand that she hadn't meant to hurt him, that she had been trapped by circumstances and fear and the desperate hope that somehow, impossibly, things would work out. But what was there to say? She had lied. She had deceived him. She had let him kiss her, knowing that their entire arrangement was built on a foundation of sand. I never meant to hurt you, she said quietly. I know you don't believe that. But it's true. He said nothing. His silence was its own answer. Seren turned and walked away, her silver dress trailing behind her like a shroud. She didn't look back. She couldn't bear to see his face, to watch the door close on whatever fragile connection they'd built. Behind her, Corvin remained in the garden, alone with the moonlight and the ruins of his carefully constructed plans. Inside the house, shadows moved behind windows. The dowager watched from her sitting room, her expression satisfied. And in the ballroom's far corner, Lady Cressida Hartwell smiled into her champagne glass, already composing the condolence note she would send to the Duke in the morning. Seren didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed in the ivory suite, still wearing the silver dress, watching the candles burn down to stubs. Her mind replayed the evening in fragments, the waltz, the kiss, the servant's interruption, Corvin's face when he learned the truth. She had known this would end. From the moment she'd taken his hand in the rain-soaked garden, she had known that her secret would surface eventually. But she had hoped for more time. Time to find another solution. Time to make him see her as more than a means to an heir. Time to make him love her enough to forgive. Foolish. So incredibly foolish. A soft knock at the door made her heart leap, but it was only Romilly who entered, her face streaked with tears. "I heard," Romilly said, crossing to sit beside her. "The servants are already whispering. By morning, all of London will know." "I'm sorry." The words felt hollow. "For deceiving your family, for putting you in this position." "Stop apologizing." Romilly grabbed her hand fiercely. "You were trying to survive. Anyone would have done the same. Your brother doesn't see it that way." "My brother is an idiot," Romilly's voice cracked. "He spent so long being the perfect duke that he's forgotten how to be human. He builds walls and calls it strength. He pushes people away and calls it duty. He's not wrong to be angry. I lied to him." "You were afraid. There's a difference." Romilly squeezed her hand. "Don't leave. Fight for this. Fight for him. How can I fight when I can't give him what he needs? What he needs and what he wants are different things." Romilly's eyes held hers, fierce and certain. "He needs an heir. Every duke needs an heir. But what he wants, what he's been starving for since our father died, is someone who sees him. Someone who makes him feel alive. He said what happened between us was a moment of weakness he regrets. He's lying. Corvin always lies when he's scared." Seren wanted to believe her, wanted to cling to the hope that somewhere beneath the ice, the man who had kissed her in the moonlight still existed. But hope had betrayed her before. "I have to go," she said quietly. "If I stay, I'll only make things worse. The scandal will destroy him. Lady Cressida will let me worry about Cressida." Romilly stood, her jaw set with determination. "And let me worry about my grandmother. All I'm asking is that you don't give up yet. Not until you've fought for what you want. What I want doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters." Romilly paused at the door. "Think about it. Promise me you'll at least think about it." She was gone before Seren could respond. The candles guttered and died, leaving only moonlight to illuminate the room where Seren sat alone with her impossible choices. Stay and fight for a man who might never forgive her, or leave and wonder for the rest of her life what might have been. Dawn broke gray and cold, a fitting mirror for Seren's heart. She had packed through the night, folding the few possessions she'd brought into her small, battered case. The beautiful dresses remained in the wardrobe. The jewels Romilly had loaned her sat untouched on the vanity. She would take nothing that wasn't hers, except the dawn, the book of poetry Corvin had given her from his father's collection. She couldn't bear to leave it behind, this single tangible proof that something real had existed between them, however briefly. She wrote 2 letters. The first was to Romilly, thanking her for her kindness and begging her not to blame Corvin for sending her away. He was only protecting his family, his legacy. That was what Dukes did. The second letter took longer. Your Grace, by the time you read this, I will be gone. I won't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I deceived you when you offered me salvation, and that betrayal cannot be undone with words. But I want you to understand why. When you found me in your garden, I was running from men who intended to use me as payment for my brother's debts. I had nothing. No resources, no protectors, no hope. You offered me a way out, and I took it because I was too afraid to face the alternative. I should have told you the truth immediately. I should have trusted you with my secret and let you decide whether to help me anyway. Instead, I let fear make my choices, and in doing so, I hurt the one person who had shown me kindness. I know you believe what happened between us was weakness. I choose to believe it was truth, the only honest thing in a relationship built on lies. You saw me. You said so yourself, and I saw you. Not the Duke, not the title, but the man who reads poetry and misses his father and has forgotten how to feel without fear. I hope you find what you're looking for, an heir, a suitable wife, and the legacy your family deserves. I hope whoever takes my place makes you happy in ways I never could. You deserve happiness, Corvin, even if you've convinced yourself you don't. With gratitude and regret, Seren. She sealed the letter with hands that trembled only slightly. The carriage was waiting when she descended the grand staircase for the last time. A footman took her case without meeting her eyes. The servants who had been so welcoming now stood in awkward silence, uncertain how to treat a woman who had almost become their mistress. Only Mrs. Blackthorne approached her directly. "Safe travels, Miss Ashford," the housekeeper said, her voice carefully neutral. Then, so quietly that only Seren could hear, "For what it's worth, I think he's making a mistake." Seren couldn't respond past the lump in her throat. She simply nodded and walked to the waiting carriage. She didn't look back at the house. She didn't search the windows for Corvin's face. She climbed into the carriage, sat on the worn leather seat, and let the driver take her away from the life she'd almost had. The streets of London passed in a blur of gray and brown. Fashionable Mayfair gave way to modest neighborhoods, then to the cramped, crowded streets where she belonged. By the time the carriage stopped outside the familiar boarding house on Mercer Street, Seren felt like she'd traveled 1,000 miles. Her room was exactly as she'd left it. Small, sparse, smelling faintly of damp and coal smoke. The bed was narrow, the window looked out on a brick wall, and the only decoration was a faded print of wildflowers her mother had loved. This was her reality. This was where she belonged. The silver dress and moonlit garden had been a dream. Nothing more. 3 days passed in a fog of grief and routine. Seren took up her needle again, accepting mending work from the landlady, losing herself in the simple rhythm of stitches. She didn't read. She couldn't bear to open the dawn and see the notes in Corvin's father's handwriting, the proof that love and loss lived side by side in every family. Phineas visited on the second day, shame-faced and awkward. "I heard what happened," her brother said, not meeting her eyes. "The Duke's people came to settle my debts with Croft. They said you'd left Thornhaven House. The arrangement ended. Seren, I'm sorry. This is all my fault. If I hadn't, don't." She cut him off, too tired for anger. "It's done. We move forward." But moving forward felt impossible when her heart remained trapped in a moonlit garden with a man who would never forgive her. On the 4th day, the door to her room burst open. Seren looked up from her mending, expecting her landlady, or perhaps Phineas. Instead, a woman stood in the doorway, travel-worn and furious, her dark hair escaping its pins. Romilly, I've been searching for you for 2 days, Romilly said, breathing hard. Do you have any idea how many boarding houses there are in London? What are you doing here? Fixing things, or trying to. Romilly crossed to sit on the narrow bed, her elegant dress absurdly out of place in the shabby room. He's falling apart, Seren. He won't eat. He won't sleep. He fired 3 servants for mentioning your name. That's not my concern anymore. Like hell it isn't. Romilly grabbed her hands, just as she had that night in the ivory suite. He loves you. He's too stubborn and scared to admit it, but he loves you. Why else would he be destroying himself over your departure? He sent me away. Because he was hurt and angry and operating from that frozen place where he hides when emotions get too real. Romilly's grip tightened. He made a mistake. Come back and make him fix it. Seren pulled her hands free. I can't give him an heir. Nothing has changed. Everything has changed. He just doesn't know it yet. What does that mean? Romilly smiled, a fierce, determined expression that reminded Seren suddenly and powerfully of Corvin himself. It means I have a plan, and you're going to help me execute it. The plan, as Romilly explained it during the carriage ride back to Mayfair, was both simple and terrifying. Grandmother controls Corvin through guilt and duty, Romilly said. She's convinced him that the title matters more than anything else, that producing an heir is the only thing that gives his existence meaning. She's not entirely wrong. Titles do require heirs. Titles require stewards. There are other ways to secure succession besides biological children. Romilly's eyes gleamed. Our father had a younger brother, Uncle Percival. He died before I was born, but he had a son, our cousin, Thaddeus. Thaddeus has 3 boys of his own. The Ashworth line is perfectly secure, even if Corvin never produces a direct heir. Serene stared at her. Then why? Because grandmother believes the direct line matters. Because Corvin has internalized her beliefs without questioning them. Because nobody ever told him he had a choice. And you think telling him now will change anything? I think it will give him permission. Romilly leaned forward intently. Corvin doesn't want to marry Lady Cressida. He doesn't want a society bride who sees him as a title and a fortune. He wants what our father had with our mother. Love, partnership, something real. He had that chance with me, and I destroyed it. You made a mistake born of fear. He made a mistake born of pride. You're even. Romilly took her hands again. The question is whether you're both brave enough to try again. The carriage slowed, and Seren realized with a start that they hadn't returned to Thornhaven House. Instead, they'd stopped before a modest townhouse in a quieter corner of Mayfair. Where are we? Lady Amara Sinclair's home, my friend I mentioned. You'll stay here while I arrange things. Romilly helped her from the carriage. Corvin can't know you're back yet. We need to prepare the battlefield first. The battlefield? Grandmother has announced a ball for tomorrow evening. Officially, it's to celebrate the end of the season. Unofficially, it's to present Lady Cressida as Corvin's intended, now that you're gone. Romilly's jaw tightened. We're going to crash it. Romilly, I can't. You can. You will. She pressed something into Serene's hands, a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, a simple gold band set with a single pearl. This is the Ashworth Duchess ring. Every duchess has worn it since our great-great-grandmother. Father gave it to Mother when he proposed, against grandmother's wishes. She wore it every day of their marriage, and one day it will be yours. Serene's throat constricted. I can't accept this. You're not accepting it. You're borrowing it. For luck. Romilly embraced her fiercely. Trust me. This will work. And if it doesn't, Romilly pulled back, her eyes bright with unshed tears. If it doesn't, At least you'll know you fought. At least you'll never have to wonder what might have been. Lady Amara Sinclair was a widow of independent means and independent opinions. "So you're the woman who's turned Thornhaven House upside down," she said, examining Serene with frank curiosity. "Good. That household needed shaking. I'm not sure I've done anything good. You've made the most controlled man in London lose control. That's practically a public service." Amara gestured for her to sit. "Romilly has told me everything. You made a mistake. So did he. The question now is what you're willing to do about it." "What can I do? He sent me away. He doesn't want to see me." Men rarely know what they want until it's standing in front of them refusing to leave. Amara poured tea with elegant efficiency. "Tomorrow night, you'll attend the ball. You'll face the Tun's scrutiny and the Dowager's fury, and Lady Cressida's spite. You'll stand in front of Corvin and tell him the truth. I already told him the truth. That's why he sent me away. You told him you couldn't bear children. That's a fact, not a truth." Amara's eyes were kind, but piercing. "The truth is how you feel about him. The truth is what you want. The truth is whether you're willing to fight for something real or surrender to something safe." Serene's hands trembled around her teacup. "What if he rejects me again? Then you'll survive. You've survived worse." Amara leaned forward. "But what if he doesn't? What if he's been waiting for someone brave enough to come back for him?" That night, alone in the guest room Amara had provided, Serene held the pearl ring and thought about bravery. She had never considered herself brave. Survival wasn't bravery, it was necessity. She had mended clothes and counted pennies, and endured hardship because the alternative was surrender, and surrender had never been an option. But this, walking back into a world that had rejected her, facing a man who had dismissed her, risking her heart on the chance that something beautiful might still be possible. This required a different kind of courage. The kind her mother had possessed when she'd nursed 3 children through scarlet fever, losing one and nearly losing Serene. The kind Corvin's father had possessed when he'd married for love, despite his mother's objections. The kind Serene had never known she had until now. She slipped the pearl ring onto her finger, feeling its slight weight like a promise. Tomorrow she would fight. Tomorrow she would tell Corvin the truth, not just the facts of her barrenness, but the truth of her heart. She loved him. She had loved him since the library, since the waltz, since the moment he'd looked at her in the garden and said, "I see you," like it meant something. And love, she was beginning to understand, was its own kind of survival. Morning brought a delivery from Romilly, a gown of deep burgundy silk, rich and bold, and impossible to ignore. "Wear this," the accompanying note read. "If you're going to war, dress like a warrior." Serene held the dress against herself, watching her reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back at her was pale, but determined, afraid, but resolute. Tonight, everything would change, one way or another. The Thornhaven ballroom blazed even brighter than before. Serene stood at the entrance, her heart pounding so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. The burgundy gown felt like armor, the pearl ring pressed against her finger like a talisman. Around her, the cream of London society swirled in silks and satins, their whispers rising like a tide. "Is that? It can't be. She left in disgrace. What nerve, showing her face here." She ignored them all. Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for one face among hundreds. "You shouldn't be here." The Dowager Duchess materialized beside her, resplendent in black silk and fury. "Your Grace." Serene curtsied, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "I came to speak with your grandson." My grandson has nothing to say to you. The engagement is dissolved. You were given funds and directed to leave London. Your presence here is an insult to this family. With respect, Your Grace, I believe your grandson can speak for himself." The dowager's eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. "You dare?" "I dare, because I have nothing left to lose." Seren met her gaze without flinching. "You can destroy my reputation. You can ensure I never work in good society again. You can make my life as difficult as your power allows. But you cannot make me leave without saying what I came to say. And what is that? That I love your grandson, not his title, not his fortune, not the life he could give me. I love the man who reads poetry alone in his library, who gave me his father's favorite book because he thought I might appreciate it, who kissed me in the moonlight and then pushed me away, because feeling something terrified him more than feeling nothing." The dowager's expression flickered. "Love doesn't produce heirs. Neither does duty without love. Your son proved that, didn't he? He married for love, against your wishes, and he was happy. Truly happy, until the day he died." Serene's voice softened. "Is that really so terrible? Is happiness really worth less than bloodlines?" Silence stretched between them, sharp as a blade. Then the dowager laughed. Not the cold, cutting laugh Serene had heard before, but something quieter, almost sad. "You remind me of her," she said. "Charlotte, Corvin's mother. She stood in this very ballroom 30 years ago and told me I was a fool for prioritizing dynasty over devotion." The dowager's voice cracked. "She was right. I was too proud to admit it then. Perhaps I'm still too proud now. Your Grace, I can't give you my blessing. The succession matters. The family matters. These aren't trivial concerns." The dowager paused, something shifting in her severe features. "But I'm old enough to recognize that I've made mistakes. Pushing Corvin toward Cressida was one of them. That woman has all the warmth of a marble statue." Serene's heart lurched. "Then you'll let me speak with him?" "I'll do better than that." The dowager gestured toward the far end of the ballroom, where Corvin stood surrounded by well-wishers he clearly wished would vanish. "I'll clear your path." She swept away, her black silk cutting through the crowd like a ship through waves. Within moments, the cluster around Corvin dispersed, leaving him alone and confused. His eyes found Serene across the ballroom. Even at this distance, she saw the shock that crossed his features, the anger that followed, and beneath both, something that looked almost like hope. She walked toward him, aware of every eye tracking her progress. The whispers crescendoed. Lady Cressida appeared at the edge of her vision, face white with fury. But Serene didn't spare her a glance. Only Corvin mattered. Only this moment. She stopped before him, close enough to see the shadows beneath his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the war being waged behind his careful mask. "You left," he said flatly. "You sent me away. You lied to me. I was afraid." She held his gaze, refusing to look away. "I'm still afraid. But I'm more afraid of living the rest of my life, wondering what might have been if I'd been brave enough to come back." His expression remained guarded. "What do you want, Miss Ashford?" "I want you to stop hiding behind duty. I want you to admit that what happened between us was real. I want—" Her voice broke, but she forced herself to continue. "I want you to choose me. Not because I can give you an heir, but because I make you feel alive." The ballroom had gone silent. Hundreds of people watched, breathless, waiting. Corvin's mask cracked. "You can't give me what I need," he said, but his voice was rough, uncertain. "Romilly told me about your cousin Thaddeus, about his 3 sons. The succession is secure whether you produce a direct heir or not." Serene stepped closer. "What you need is an excuse, What you want is permission to choose something for yourself. And you think you can give me that? I think you can give it to yourself. I'm just asking you to try." He stared at her for an endless moment. The ice in his eyes warred with something warmer, something she'd glimpsed in the library and felt in his kiss. Then, slowly, his hand rose to touch her face. "You came back," he whispered. "I'll always come back." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Unless you truly don't want me. Unless what we had was really nothing. Tell me to go, and I'll go. But tell me the truth this time. Not what duty demands. What you want." His thumb brushed away a tear. "I want you to stay," he said. "I want you to stay." The words hung in the air between them, fragile and world-changing. Serene couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at Corvin as the ballroom erupted in whispers around them. "Corvin! I was wrong." His voice grew stronger, steadier. "I was angry and hurt, and I let that override everything else. I sent you away because it was easier than admitting what I felt. What do you feel?" He laughed, a raw sound that held no humor. "Terrified. You terrify me, Serene. You make me want things I'd convinced myself I didn't need. You make me feel things I'd buried so deep I thought they were dead. Is that why you pushed me away? I pushed you away because wanting something means it can be taken." His hand moved from her cheek to cup the back of her neck, gentle but possessive. "My mother was taken. My father was taken. Everyone I've ever loved has been taken. And I learned that the only way to survive was to stop loving altogether. And now I'm choosing to love anyway." He pulled her closer, until they stood chest to chest in the center of the ballroom. Scandal be damned. "I'm choosing you, not because of duty or heirs or what society expects, because you crashed into my garden soaking wet and desperate, and woke something in me I thought was dead." She laughed through her tears. "That's not exactly a fairy tale beginning. It's ours. That's what matters." His forehead rested against hers. "I love you, Serene. I've been fighting it since the moment you negotiated conditions with me in the rain. But I'm done fighting. What about the heir? Your grandmother? The succession?" Romilly explained the situation with Thaddeus rather forcefully this morning. "Apparently, I've been too blinded by duty to see alternatives." His lips quirked. "My grandmother also had some choice words for me about my father and what he would think of my behavior." "The Dowager spoke to you?" "She told me I was being an idiot. Those were her exact words." He pulled back slightly, just enough to look into her eyes. "She was right." "She usually is," the Dowager's voice cut in, and Serene turned to find the older woman approaching with Romilly at her side. "Though I do appreciate hearing it acknowledged. Grandmother, don't grandmother me in that tone." But there was no real heat in her voice. "I've already made my peace with this. Miss Ashford has spine, and apparently that's what you need." She fixed Serene with a stern look. "I still expect you to learn proper etiquette, and your wardrobe requires significant improvement. And, Mother," Romilly elbowed her grandmother gently, "perhaps save the critique for later." The Dowager huffed but subsided. Corvin turned back to Serene, his expression softening. "I believe we were interrupted. You were declaring your love in front of half the ton." "Only half? We should fix that." Before she could respond, he raised his voice, projecting across the ballroom with the authority of 3 centuries of Ashworth dukes. "If I might have everyone's attention." The whispers died. Every eye turned toward them. "Many of you have heard rumors about Miss Serene Ashford and the circumstances of our broken engagement. I'm here to set the record straight." His hand found hers, intertwining their fingers. "I asked Miss Ashford to marry me for practical reasons. She agreed for practical reasons. It was meant to be an arrangement, nothing more. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lady Cressida smirked from her position near the refreshment table, clearly anticipating a final dismissal. But arrangements have a way of becoming something else, Corvin continued. Somewhere between the negotiations and the dancing lessons, I fell in love. With her courage, her honesty, the way she argues with me like titles don't matter, the way she makes me want to be better than duty alone requires. The smirk slid off Cressida's face. I sent her away in anger, and it was the worst mistake of my life. She came back anyway, because she's braver than I am. Corvin turned to face her fully, both hands holding hers. Miss Ashford, Serene, will you forgive my stupidity and marry me? Not for heirs or titles or practical reasons, just because I love you and can't imagine facing the rest of my life without you. The ballroom held its breath. Serene looked at him, this complicated, wounded, infuriating man who had found her fleeing through his garden and offered her a deal that changed everything, who had given her poetry and pushed her away and pulled her back and stood here now, bearing his heart before hundreds of witnesses. Yes, she said. Now. And all was yes. He kissed her. Not the desperate kiss of the garden, not the restrained kiss of duty. This was a declaration, a promise, a beginning. His arms wrapped around her, and she clung to him, and the world fell away. When they finally broke apart, the ballroom erupted. Some applauded. Some gasped. Lady Cressida fled toward the exit, her mother trailing behind. The dowager dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief she'd deny using later. Romilly cheered loudly enough to be heard over the orchestra. Well, Corvin murmured against Serene's temple, I believe we've given them something to talk about. They were going to talk anyway. True. He pulled back just enough to look at her, and his smile was the warmest thing she'd ever seen. I love you. I know. She touched his face, marveling at the softness in eyes that had once seemed so cold. I love you too. Around them, the ball resumed. But for Serene and Corvin, nothing existed beyond this moment, this miracle, and this impossible love that had grown from rain and desperation and the courage to try again. 1 year later, the rain fell softly on the Thornhaven gardens, silver threads catching the lamplight from the windows. Inside, music drifted from the ballroom where the anniversary celebration was in full swing. But Serene stood alone beneath the stone archway, her face turned up to the sky, letting the water kiss her cheeks. You'll catch cold. She smiled without turning. You said that to me once before. Corvin emerged from the house, foregoing an umbrella despite his expensive evening clothes. He crossed to stand beside her, letting the rain soak into his shoulders without complaint. That was the night everything changed, he said. That was the night I crashed your garden and ruined your plans. You improved my plans immeasurably. He took her hand, bringing it to his lips. The gold band on her finger caught the lamplight, the Ashworth Duchess ring, passed down through generations of women who had loved and been loved in return. Though I recall you were considerably more bedraggled, and you were considerably more terrifying. I prefer formidable. I prefer insufferable. But she leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. Do you ever regret it, choosing me over a proper heir? Never. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. Besides, you've given me something better than an heir. What's that? A reason to come home. He pressed a kiss to her temple. A reason to feel alive. They stood together in the rain, just as they had that first night. But everything was different now. The fear was gone. The secrets were told. What remained was simple and profound. Two people who had found each other in the storm and chosen to weather all storms together. I have something for you, Corvin said, pulling a small package from his coat. A gift for our anniversary? Something I've been holding on to. He pressed the package into her hands. Open it. Inside was a letter, yellowed with age, the handwriting familiar. Seren unfolded it with trembling fingers. My darling Charlotte, if you're reading this, I've already asked your mother for her blessing, and she's already refused. But I'm asking anyway, not because I don't respect her position, but because I love you more than I fear her disapproval. Marry me. Not for alliance or duty or propriety. Marry me because you make every room brighter. Marry me because life without you seems colorless. Marry me because I choose love over safety, now and always. Yours eternally, Edmund. Tears streamed down Serene's face, mingling with the rain. Your father wrote this. To my mother. Before their wedding. Corvin's voice was thick. I found it in his papers after he died. I kept it because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand how someone could choose love over duty so willingly. And now I understand perfectly. He turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. You taught me what he knew. That love isn't weakness. That choosing happiness doesn't mean abandoning responsibility. That the heart and duty can walk the same path. She kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. We should go inside, she murmured against his lips. Our guests are waiting. Let them wait, he pulled her closer. This is our anniversary. I want to stand in the rain with my wife and remember how lucky I am that she crashed my garden. Seren laughed, bright and free. I didn't crash anything. Your gate was open. Details. His smile was the one he saved for her alone. Warm, unguarded, alive. Come, Duchess, dance with me. They danced there in the rain. No music but the rhythm of falling water. No audience but the moon behind the clouds. Two people who had found each other in the dark and chosen to walk together into the light. And in the library window above, the dawn sat open to a familiar page, its words a benediction. Love's mysteries and souls do grow, but yet the body is his book. But some stories, Seren knew now, were written on the heart.